A very warm welcome to you all. My name is Jessica Lanker-Frost, and I'm a Policy Officer at NOWC. It is my pleasure to be chairing today's event on green responsibilities, navigating devolution in parks and open spaces. Firstly, I'd like to quickly run through a few housekeeping announcements, some of which are shown on screen. Do use the Q&A function throughout the event to put questions to our speakers, and the chat function to interact with your fellow delegates and to share any information or links. If you require any technical support, please do post in the chat, and my NOWC colleagues will try their best to help. The closed caption feature can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. Once the captions are on, you can access a live transcription of the event. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please contact NOWC support via the chat, and we will endeavour to rectify the issue. After the event, we'll send the presentation slides used today, chat, and any other useful information. And we will also be inviting your feedback on today's event. So please do look out for the feedback form, which should pop up on your screens following the conclusion of the webinar. NOWC would like to thank its partners, Clear Councils Insurance, CCLA, and Blast Share Eliminations for their extensive support for today's online event. Now, devolution has increasingly shifted responsibilities to local councils, and this includes managing parks and open spaces. These vital green spaces are the lungs of their communities and play a crucial role in promoting public health, recreation, and biodiversity. However, recent trends have shown that as principal authorities face escalating financial pressures, they can no longer sustain the management of these spaces, often leaving local councils to pick up the pieces without adequate financial support. Today's event will provide essential guidance for local councils, grappling with the responsibility of managing open spaces and parks in a challenging financial landscape. By offering a deep dive into practical strategies, collaborative models, and real-world examples, attendees will leave with the tools and insights they need to safeguard the future of their community's green spaces. So, whether you're responsible for the day-to-day management of parks and open spaces, or you're seeking solutions to ensure the sustainability of these vital community assets, this event is an unmissable opportunity. So, I'm thrilled to be joined today by a brilliant panel of speakers. Dave Morris, Chair of the National Federation of Parks and Green Spaces. Councillor Theo Butt-Phillip, Lead Member for Transformation and Human Resources at Somerset Council, and also a member of Wells City Council. And Ben Parker, Clerk at Minehead Town Council. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Dave. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you. So hopefully my screen is now being shared. Is that okay?
Yes, that looks great.
Fantastic. So, okay, thank you for inviting me. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk to a wide range of people who are involved with managing or being concerned about green spaces. So I'm chair of the National Federation, which is the voice of the movement of over 7,000 local Friends of Park groups across the UK. My local group is Friends of Lordship Recreation Ground in Tottenham, and I'm also chair of the London Friends of Green Spaces network. So the question it posed is, how can local people, park users and local communities get fully involved in their green spaces as partners with those who have the legal responsibility and management responsibility for those spaces? And I'm going to just briefly touch on some thoughts about that issue. So here we can see about the wider movement across the UK. There are about 7,000 Friends of Parks groups. When we say parks, it could be a woodland, it could be a recreation ground, it could be a nature reserve, it could be all manner of public green spaces. And the Friends groups tend to be concentrated in urban areas. Some of the most significant are identified on that map. But Friends groups exist, or whatever they're called. They may be called Friends groups, they may be called, they may be a residents association heavily involved in a green space. It may be they've set up a user group or whatever. But they do exist across the whole of the UK. For example, a whole national park might have a Friends group, but also it could be a little pocket park in a local village. So it really is a very diverse kind of movement. Now, the next three slides are probably the most significant. And this one particularly goes to the heart of the matter today, is what can park users do to help maintain, manage, promote their space. So mainly the key points are they can be the eyes and ears of management effectively. They can help promote the space, organize activities, help with maintenance, access and extra funding which local councils can't access, also provide expertise from within the community, come up with ideas and vision for improvements, help to protect spaces that might come under threat, and generally be a voice for the community. Now, obviously, every Friends group doesn't necessarily do all of those things. Some groups may focus on practical maintenance, litter picking, bulb planting or whatever. Some focus on activities and events, public events. But a strong group can do all of those things. And if you look at the data on the right-hand side, it identifies from our own audit of the movement what are the most popular activities that Friends groups take up. And you can see there, for example, Facebook page, 88% of groups that responded to our survey have their own Facebook page, and 91% do practical volunteering. Organizing small community events, 90% of groups do that. Applying for grants, 84%. Managing notice boards, 59%, and so on. So not all groups do everything, and some groups focus on some things more than others, but you can see there it's quite substantial contribution to how a site is maintained and managed if you have a strong Friends group for that site. So how to ensure that community action can be effective? So the best way is to have a strong and independent group run by and for those that use that site. And it's particularly important that they have obviously a good connection with those others that use the site and their local communities, that they have good relationship with managers, with amenities teams, and the landowner. But it's important to recognize that every space has its own character, every community has its own character, every group. So, it's not just a kind of standard template that can be imposed. It has to develop organically from the local community with support and encouragement from those who have the responsibility to manage the space. So what kind of practical collaboration with management is possible and is needed? So encouragement and support, absolutely. So access to equipment, meeting and storage space where possible. Good communication and collaboration, which is based upon a two-way relationship that needs to be developed over time, and respect and understanding both ways. That's not always easy between councils and communities and vice versa. So it needs to be nurtured and developed and built up. Identifying good practice and sharing that and trying to aspire to that. Developing a vision for the space, so it's not just reactive, but building a long-term relationship with a long-term vision for how the space can be animated and maintained and improved. And of course, celebrating achievements and everybody patting each other on the back. So now some friends groups do a huge amount of volunteering. Here we can see on the top left that 5% of friends groups do over 5,000 hours a year. But I think that the average is generally about 1,000 hours. Obviously, it depends on the size of the space, the strength of the community, the strength of the group, and support from management and so on. And this has an enormous benefit for those that are involved, for the green space itself, for the management, and for the wider community, where they can see that they can contribute to helping maintain and promote their own local public facilities and services. So this is a challenge we all have to face together. And I think everybody knows what the key challenges are, which is falling budgets. Involving the community is a challenge, and involving the whole community in different ways is not always easy. The kind of improvements that may be needed for that space are a challenge, and also protection from inappropriate usage or development. These are challenges that we should face together, communities and councils. And this is something from I think the Daily Mail, just showing that friends groups are, massively supported by communities and by the media. Especially local media will be very interested when there's communities involved in their local green spaces. This is some complex graphic about how the National Federation works and how we link up with other partners nationally, and how we organise, how the movement is organised. At the top is the local groups, and then the next layer is the forums. The forums are networks of local groups within a local authority area, such as Birmingham has 130 friends groups and has one forum that links all those groups, and there's much smaller forums in different areas of the country. So anyway, that's a complex slide which people can look at later on. So nationally, the National Federation, the role of the National Federation. So we're an unfunded voluntary organisation democratically run by our members. Our members are the forums of the networks and forums of local groups. And we support the grassroots. We have online guidance. We provide a national voice for the community. We help to raise the profile of green spaces and promote standards such as the Green Flag Award standard. and we liaise with the wider sector and lobby government. We're actually we are the community representative on the Parks Working Group, which is the official liaison body between the MHCLG and the green space sector, and we lead on the community empowerment sub-theme of that Parks Working Group, which hopefully is trying to impress on government that they should be stepping up with their responsibilities to properly fund the sector and support the sector. That's basically it. Probably the most significant website which we promote is the parkscommunity.org.uk, which is a site written by and for friends groups with guidance and advice and case studies and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. If you have any questions for Dave, please do put them in the Q&A box. Now, I'd like to introduce Theo.
Hello, that's unmuted, isn't it? Hello, thank you very much, Jessica, and thank you very much to Dave for that presentation. My name is Theo Butt-Phillip. I'm a member of the executive of Somerset Council, and I'm responsible for transformation, human resources, and localities. That probably doesn't tell you anything about what I do, but it does include our relationships with city, town, and parish councils, and crucially, devolution from Somerset Council to the city, town, and parish council sector within Somerset. And as has been alluded to before I was a Somerset councillor, I was a Wells City Council. In fact, I still am a Wells City Councillor, and I was Mayor of Wells. So I've got a degree of insight from both sides when we're talking about unitary councils and the city, town, and parish council sector. Somerset Council has been on I think it's fair to say it's been on a wild ride over the past few years. The authority, as we know it now, came into existence on the 1st of April 2023, following a fairly acrimonious set of disagreements between the previous district and county over exactly what form the unitarisation of Somerset's principal authorities would take. And that's something that colleagues in areas of the country which have yet to go through the local government reorganisation process will, I'm sure, be looking forward to having to put up with themselves. That will create more space and opportunities for city, town, and parish councils. I don't doubt. For us, we had two competing bids. One Somerset, led by Somerset County Council, which, and the clue is in the name, advocated for a single large unitary covering the whole of the old county council area, and then Stronger Somerset, led by the district councils, which advocated for a two unitary model, and it was the single large unitary bid which the government agreed to. But one of the similarities between those two bids was a very strong view that there needed to be an increased role for city, town, and parish councils with the delivery of services within their communities across the county. I think it's fairly obvious to people that when you're talking about a council the size of Somerset, delivering everything, taking over from the districts, you will there will be a view that is perhaps too distant, and you need to look for alternative models of delivering things, and that's unsurprisingly is where the city, town, and parish council sector comes in. There's nothing new about this across Somerset. It's one of the really interesting parts of going through the local government reorganisation process, is that it became more apparent to people how differently things had been done on a district by district basis. So, not on parks particularly, but for example, in some parts of Somerset, the district ran all the public toilets, and in some there weren't any district council funded ones, and in some it was a hybrid setup where some were run by city, town, and parish councils, some were run by the district councils. So obviously we're going through the process of having to look at how we can come up with a more equitable solution to that. And one of those options is all about transferring things to city, town, and parish councils so that things can be delivered at a much more local level. I thought it was really interesting. Some of all of Dave's presentation was really interesting, but particularly was interested that the friends groups tend to be in the more urban areas in general, and that doesn't really surprise me. I mean, I've lived in London as well as Somerset, but obviously, I think a lot of those roles, which might be picked up by a voluntary, or might have to be picked up by a voluntary organisation in, Camberwell, where I used to live, may well be taken over by city, town, or parish councils in our more rural areas and the areas that are covered by those because they have those structures available uh, to do so. Going through the local government reorganisation process, I would say that I think it's fair to say that there may have been a tendency in the build up to that to overpromise to city, town, and parish councils what might be delivered as a result of devolutions and not sufficiently to manage the expectations because in addition to going through local government reorganisation, we ended up going through a financial emergency at Somerset, which meant that we had to be much, much, much more hard-nosed about what we were and weren't able to devolve because we have an incredibly pressing need for funding. So although there may have been talk in the past of devolving assets which generate significant amounts of income, that hasn't been something that's been on our radar, which I know is really disappointing for a lot of people in the city, town, and parish council sector because it means when they are taking over things like parks and playgrounds and green spaces, it is generally speaking not coming with financial resources to support that. Um, and that is a bone of contention. It's a function of the financial reality that we face, but it does mean that we're seeing city, town, and parish councils having to increase their precepting in order to take on a lot of these services. I would say that within Somerset, that has been with a generally fairly significant amount of public support. That's certainly been my experience, and it's something that we've done here in the city of Wells uh, as well. But we have managed to deliver, substantial portions of devolution, particularly to our larger town and city councils, Bridgewater and Taunton and Yeovil in particular as the very big ones. Bridgewater has been our pilot. They were very ambitious and wanted to take on large amounts of, managing all of the green spaces, managing all of the playgrounds and parks, and indeed going further and taking on litter collection and street cleansing as well. Taunton, our newest town council, that only came into existence in 2023, is also now one of the biggest town councils in the country, both in terms of population and in terms of budget and in terms of staffing. And so we've seen more being devolved to them, but there are still significant amounts of Taunton that we could take that further with if we have the time and resources. And Yeovil has also been hugely ambitious, taking on Yeovil Country Park, as well as other non-green space assets. And then when we look at the smaller towns and indeed the city where I am, so we've had Minehead, and we're going to hear from Ben shortly, which will be great, and Wellington and Wells and Frome and Glastonbury taking on many of their green spaces, as well. I think looking at it at the moment, there's definitely been a frustration around the pace that all of this has moved because we've been talking about it since the creation of unitary councils in Somerset became sort of a live topic again, and because of the amount of resource that's had to go into actually creating that council, because of the financial emergency and the resourcing implications, that has meant that we haven't been able to move as fast as we would like to. Whether that was ever realistic, I don't know. I spoke to a friend of mine who recently became leader of a neighbouring council, which went unitary in 2009, 2009 who said that they were still working on this process. So it is a sort of multi-decade process, perhaps. But I think it's really important that when you're talking to your principal authorities about devolution of green spaces and assets, that you get an understanding of the sort of capacity they have within their internal team. So I'm thinking particularly around the legal and the assets departments. Those tend to be areas which can hold up these transfers. But it's all a work in progress here in Somerset. It's generally speaking gone reasonably well, not without hiccups. And I'm hoping that Ben will be able to reflect more on how it's actually worked on the ground, because my responsibility is for the Somerset side of it, but it's going to be great to hear the town council perspective on it.
Thank you, Theo. Now I'll hand over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Theo. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Before I begin, I just want to start with a bit of an apology. I had planned to bring a PowerPoint presentation today to make things a little bit more visual and engaging. However, as many of you may have heard in the news, events in my community over the past week has meant that the focus has been very much on providing support and assistance to those affected. And my thoughts remain very much with everyone impacted. So this is my experience as a clerk on the managing and devolution of green spaces in Minehead. I appreciate that some of you may have had experiences with devolution yourself and may have had completely different experiences, and those of you that may be going through devolution in the near future may also have different experiences, but these are simply my observations from our own journey in Minehead. So just a brief introduction. So obviously my name's Ben. I'm the clerk at Minehead Town Council. We're a coastal town in the southwest of England. We operate under a unitary authority, Somerset Council, as you've just heard from Theo. We serve a population of approximately 12,000 residents. We have 16 elected members that represent 5 wards in our town. We currently manage many public amenities, which includes parks, play areas, public toilets, gardens, and open spaces. And we've recently received further devolved responsibilities from Somerset Council for more green spaces in our town. So the devolution shift, as we know, it's going to be a key word in our sector over the next few years. So what does it actually mean? So in its simplest term, devolution is about transferring assets and decision-making powers closer to the community. The aim is to give local people more influence over the services and the facilities that affect them. Unfortunately, there isn't an off-the-shelf model for devolution. It does and will look different in every area, whether it's a parish, town, or city. This obviously brings opportunities because you can create something that works for your community, but also challenges because you're often navigating into the unknown. Here in Minehead, devolution has been an ongoing process for quite some time. We've seen it evolve through changes to our district councils, and now with the move to a unitary authority, a journey that has actually dates back as far as 2015 in Minehead. We've been in many ways, we've been lucky because it's been a phased approach. So we've taken the public toilets on very early. As Theo was saying, there was still some district councils that were carrying out public conveniences. In Minehead, we weren't so fortunate, and we took them on as early back as 2015. So ultimately, I think though it does provide an opportunity to improve responsiveness and local pride within our communities. So the challenges we face. So it's easy to think that if you take on more amenities, you simply need more amenity staff. And while that's partly true, there's much more to consider. With additional services come more inquiries, more complaints, and generally more demand on the office. That means we need to make sure that our office team is adequately resourced to cope. And then, of course, there's the issue of budgets. Like many councils that rely heavily on the precept, we always have to ask, how can we afford to do this? Many of the spaces we have inherited have had signs of historic underfunding and lack of care, and that has to be factored into our plans. On top of that, there are safety requirements, compliance responsibilities, and above all, the challenge of balancing public expectations with the resources we actually have. That has been one of the biggest things that I feel we've encountered, is having to balance the public expectation, which I'll discuss a bit more in a moment. So our approach and strategies. To make devolution work, we know we've had to start by listening. We've engaged with residents and stakeholders to understand their priorities and build community support. We've having known the situation in Somerset Council and our own ambitions for devolved services, we've taken a more proactive approach to community engagement. A lot of councils do things like the mayor's coffee mornings and such. What we've done is we've evolved that slightly, and we do a community engagement event. We host them monthly at our centrally based community centre, but we've also made more of a proactive effort to be at town events and in the town centre on weekends and during the course of the week, to provide people, or to allow people to provide the feedback and just engagement into what's going on, the whys and the wheres. We've partnered with local volunteer groups and community organisations, which have been a huge help in both capacity and community engagement. And finally, we've worked to streamline and integrate services, so we now have a consistent and joined up approach to maintenance across our spaces. I think one of the biggest bits of feedback we had from our community is, prior to devolution, we had a Somerset Council grounds maintenance team that worked in Minehead, and a Minehead Town Council maintenance team that worked in Minehead. And obviously there was different approaches to how we managed our areas, and there was a lot of inconsistencies, and there was a lot of public frustration as to who they would send their inquiries to if there was a problem, whether it was us or whether it was Somerset Council. And through devolution, I think we've managed to streamline that for the community. So the wins so far in Minehead, as a result, we're seeing faster responses to local issues like play area repairs and litter bins. Our maintenance standards, I'd like to think, have improved thanks to this streamlining of services, and we've been able to revitalise spaces from community areas, and we've introduced rewilding zones, which, again, having previously worked for the district council myself, it was interesting with things like rewilding. When I was at the district council, rewilding was purely it wasn't purely a financial thing, but there was a heavy emphasis on the cost saving side of rewilding. As we're being part of the town council now, we've made a conscious effort for rewilding, so we've been able to do it with community feedback, a lot more engagement, and that seems to have worked really well in our communities and has been really well received. We've also built stronger relationships with volunteers, local schools and community groups. Really interested in Dave's presentation, and I think the next step for us in Minehead would be to develop some of these more informal community groups and volunteer groups into things like friends groups. And I would say that through devolution, we have received more community feedback and input than ever before, both good and bad, but we are receiving a lot more community feedback. And I think generally it has led to an improved town image and a stronger sense of civic pride in Minehead. So lessons learned. So if you are looking at taking areas on, if I had one piece of advice, it would be to start with a clear wish list and understanding of what you want and the benefits local ownership will bring to your communities. I would also say, and as Theo said, understanding the capacity limitations in the higher tier authority. If you can, I would start the conversations as early as possible, and if possible, to establish a single point of contact. Unfortunately, we won't be able to expect the higher tier to provide all the costs and understandings or give you the full picture. You often have to fill in the gaps yourself. Begin with what you can realistically manage and scale up gradually. Keep communication open with both residents and the principal authority, and make sure councillors are involved throughout the whole process with things like advisory groups and asset mapping. Crucially, when it comes to devolution, ensure that you document every council decision clearly, and invest in training and upskilling any in-house teams you have. And finally, be prepared to compromise along the way. Things you might want to ask before taking on these areas. There are some key questions, and they are such as, what does the higher tier authority actually own and manage in our parish? As I've said, you know, if you can go out and map your areas, some of you on this call today might be able to list off the top of their head some of the areas you have. But even me, you know, I'm Minehead born and bred. I felt like I had a really good idea on the areas that were owned by the district council and us within Minehead. But actually, when you do a bit more of a deep dive into it, even I learned a lot of things. Who will be responsible for any liabilities, and what type of transfer best suits each site? So again, in Minehead, we've not just had a full-scale asset transfer across all sites. We've had full asset transfers, yes, but we've also had leasehold agreements, and also there's some sites that fall outside of both of them that are picked up by more sort of casual maintenance agreements. I would suggest a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to understand these opportunities and weaknesses and strengths best. It's also important to clarify exactly what's included in the transfer, whether that's trees, walls, lighting, or assets, and if there are any other immediate works required and what their cost will be. As I've said, we have taken on a lot of assets that have shown signs of underfunding through the years, so we are completely aware of what we're taking on and the costs involved, which has given us a clearer picture for future budgeting. So looking ahead in Minehead, our focus is going to be to continue to improve the biodiversity and embed sustainable practices in everything we do. We'll be actively seeking funding opportunities to upgrade our open spaces and make them even better for the community. And we also want to engage more residents by recruiting more volunteers and empowering the community to take part in caring for our community spaces. And finally, we'll keep sharing experiences with other councils facing similar challenges, continuing to build those valuable networks. In Somerset, I do feel very lucky. We've got a very, very active branch of both the Somerset Association of Local Councils and the SLCC. And it is really good opportunity to share ideas, to share problems, to discuss your experiences and to learn off other people's experiences. I feel on a personal level that's been very valuable for me. So then just to sort of summarise with my final thoughts is devolution does have its challenges. It's not, and pardon the pun, a walk in the park, but it has also created opportunities for local innovation. We are proud in Minehead to have been able to play a role in protecting and enhancing our green spaces for the community, and not just for now, but hopefully for generations to come. And I think, you know, we have to be prepared to learn. So we welcome the opportunity, collaboration, shared learning, and when mistakes are made, obviously learning from our mistakes. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for still making time to speak at today's event. Now, before we move on to questions and answers, I just wanted to add briefly. Theo, do you want to come in here?
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica. I just wanted to say a huge thanks for Ben for coming at all today. Frankly, I don't know if everyone on the call has followed the news of what has happened in Minehead, but there was last week a tragic coach accident involving one of the children from one of the schools at Minehead, and the community has been going through an enormous amount. The way that that community in Minehead and wider Exmoor has come together is truly impressive, and it's a testament to Ben's professionalism that he's here at all today, as well as dealing with everything else he's got to deal with. And I just wanted to say if anyone wants to help support that community in any way, there is a fundraiser through the Somerset Community Foundation, and I will put the link to that in the chat here, in case anyone wants to add their support to that. So huge thanks to Ben for coming along today.
Thank you, Theo. And I echo Theo's words there. Now we'll move on to the Q&A part of this event. I will take questions from the Q&A box and put them to our panelists. And please do continue putting your questions in there, and we will try and get through as many as possible. Now, starting off with a question for yourself, Dave. How are these friends groups constituted? The question is asked because a barrier locally for community involvement is concern about potential personal liability in cases of accidents within the park.
Right. So I think that there's a kind of spectrum of, starting at one end from extremely informal, random individuals and small groups of people being concerned, maybe active in some way, organizing an activity, liaising with the management, occasionally, to the other end of the spectrum is an extremely well organized group constituted with a formal agreement with the landowners and managers, maybe even taking on lease. So there's a spectrum, and there's everything in between in terms of, if we want communities to be involved, it has to develop organically. There's a lot of different options depending upon the circumstances, the general circumstances relating to that space and that community. So at the very informal level, they're just members of the public, concerned, maybe raising their voices, maybe doing something small. But a friends group generally, once it's established and started meeting and building up its membership, which it can do from an informal start, at some point, the majority of friends groups are constituted. They're generally voluntary associations, which is the general community form in this country. And there's over 1 million voluntary associations. Some choose to become charities. That's a much bigger challenge, administrative challenge. The minimum, the sort of basic, if you like, standard practice would be, once a group is established, to adopt a constitution, then you can get a bank account, and it flows from there, formal agreements with the landowner or the management of the site as needed. In fact, most friends groups don't have that formal agreement because generally local authorities will have a policy landscape of supporting community groups or community involvement and empowerment, and formal agreements in terms of exactly what that relationship will be, and are less common. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be taking on a memorandum of understanding. That's a kind of formal agreement, but it's not legally binding between the community and the council. Or if they take on a lease, obviously, then that's a much bigger legal responsibility. So, so the answer to the question is it's a spectrum. And if we want communities to be involved, we need to encourage those communities. If we just say, oh, if you're going to get involved, then you've got to do X, Y, and Z before you even, pick up a piece of litter in a local space, then it's not going to happen. So I think, you need to build up the relationship over time, start with the informal relationship, start, ongoing, build that kind of collaboration, work out where the community want to go. And I think the other thing I think that's quite important is if the community just sees this as cheap labor, that's starting off on the wrong foot. It's about empowerment. It's about community being involved and having pride in their local facilities. I mean, parks, everybody loves green spaces and parks. So the opportunities there to engage people, but not to put people off before they even start by getting very formalistic. People will develop that formality to achieve what they want to achieve as the relationship develops.
Thank you. Now I have a question for Theo. I've heard neighbourhood area committees have existed in Somerset since the 90s. How do these work with parish councils? Do they make decisions?
There have been a range of different structures in place, particularly within the old district councils. So we had 5 district councils, then we had 4, now we've got the unitary. So there have been a lot of different structures in place. Out in West Somerset, there were sort of area forums that did, I think, involve the district the parish councillors. In South Somerset, we had area committees which were made up, more commonly just made up of members of the district council. We've now implemented something new. So what we have now is called local community networks. Now they're an interesting sort of hybrid body because they don't have the sorts of formal powers that a lot of traditional area committees would have. They have a much wider membership, so they're made up of the relevant local members, representatives of all of the city, town, and parish council in the in the relevant area. There are 18 of these across Somerset, but also representatives of other relevant groups, depending on what's being discussed. Maybe the police, maybe the VCFSE, maybe a local active travel group. It depends on who they are. But the parish councils are very much, a really key part of those structures that we're now trying to see how they can work better.
Thank you. Now, our next question is for Ben. Did services get devolved to Minehead after the unitary had been created or before?
So in Minehead, it was probably a slightly different situation because we'd gone from a district council. We were a very small district, West Somerset Council, which then merged with Taunton Deane to create Somerset West and Taunton Council, and that was all before unitary was even a thing or thought about. And then it became unitary authority through Somerset Council. So all that happened probably in the space of about 10 or 15 years. So we, as the district councils were experiencing difficulties, there was elements of responsibility devolved to us. Now, some of it went formally with things like the public conveniences. That was before unitary authority. But there was also more informal things that the town council picked up, such as the highways verge cutting in the town. But I would say a majority of the green spaces that we've taken on now, we've got, for example, if anyone knows Minehead, we've got Blenheim Gardens in Minehead, which, is described as the crown in the jewel in Minehead's crown, that's only just come across to us since unitary authority. So I would say that generally the majority of the green spaces have come over since unitary authority. Yes.
Thank you. Now, I've got a question here that says, will you charge large legal fees for transferring assets? Why, if assets are moving from one local authority to another, town to parish, and that these assets remain for the benefit of the community, such as a community wildlife area, are town councils charging legal fees at all? Especially when the town is not transferring with any funding and the area brings in zero remuneration. Who would like to come in on that question?
I wouldn't mind answering that. I did see that one come into the chat, and that's actually a really good question, and certainly a question that we were posed with at the start. I think Somerset Council, to be fair and in their credit, they've made it very clear from the start that the town and parish council would have to cover their own legal fees. It has been a bit of a headache, and obviously, you know, legal fees, they can really escalate, and before you've even taken these areas on, you are paying thousands of pounds in sort of the legal side of things. What we've done at Minehead, and I know that other smaller towns have done in Somerset as well, is they've managed to gain support from a local solicitors who have provided. So in Minehead, our local solicitors have provided a bit of an overview, but we've managed to keep a lot of the legal scrutiny in-house. That has increased massively on our workload, but it has really helped keep the costs down. What we do have to bear in mind is that, you know, these are public spaces going from public body to public body. It's not like the private sale of a house. So if you were to go to a solicitor, they would quite probably give a more in-depth level of scrutiny to the transfer that would potentially even jeopardize it. So I think that if you can try and find yourself a pragmatic solicitor that's prepared to work with you, that understands the dynamic of what devolution is and the asset transfer from public body to public body, that would give you a real helping hand. And like I said, you know, talk to your fellow clerks with your local branches. I think there was something, and I must admit, I'm not entirely sure whether it came to anything, but I know at one point our local ALC were planning on looking at finding a series of solicitors that will provide like a package for town and parish councils in the area. I don't know how that worked, but again, your local ALC might be able to help with that as well.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of add to that. I mean, Ben's covered pretty much everything. But why are there legal fees? Well, the legal fees will vary depending on what you're doing. But if there's a freehold transfer of land, there is a significant amount of legal work that has to go into that. Probably less if it's a leasehold. But the lawyers, they do need to be paid. Apologies to any lawyers on here. Certainly, it'd be great if the top tier authorities could meet the legal fees for both sides, but I don't think the finances are there to enable that to happen, sadly. And on the point about finding appropriate solicitors, I haven't heard anything recently on that either in a Somerset context, Ben, but it is something that was being worked on. And I think the really important thing, as Ben has sort of touched upon there, is finding solicitors who understand the work that's being done. That they understand that this is not a commercial exchange. It's an exchange between two local authorities, and therefore it's not the same as you buying your house or someone buying a commercial property. It requires a different level of work that is proportionate to what is being done and the nature of the transaction.
Thank you, Theo. Now I will move on to our next question. This is for you, Ben. How long has the process taken from start to now to take on the assets transferred from the hire to council?
Well, if I said I've probably aged about 18 years in the last 18 months, it's been a long process, and it doesn't happen overnight. As we were just talking about, even the legal scrutiny of the papers, you read through them, you reread them, they'll go to council, there might be some problems brought up from it. The negotiation process was very long for us. I feel that given the financial backdrop at Somerset Council, there was an element of urgency with them, which probably helped us to focus our minds as a town council. I think that, obviously there was from a Somerset Council point of view, there was a real desire to get the devolution in Minehead done over the line before the 1st of April at the start of the financial year. I think that with that, and again, just one bit of advice I would say is, if you are having a higher tier authority that are experiencing financial pressures, you may feel the pressure, and you may feel the need just to go with the flow and to push along with it. But I mean, obviously, and I'm sure it goes without saying, but these are some really big decisions that you and your councillors and your communities are making, and some very big liabilities as well. So if you do need to put the brakes on, then do. If it doesn't feel quite right, then it's probably worth just taking a step back and reviewing it. But like I say, it is a long process, even with the best will in the world, and even with the sense of urgency that we were experiencing. It does take time, and it won't happen overnight.
Thank you, Ben. Now, I have another question here saying the Unitary Council has several reliable funding streams, for example, from business and government, as well as from residents. But a parish or town council is only funded by the residential precept. How important is this as a deciding factor when considering taking ownership of green spaces, parks and recreation assets? Ben, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, so as the question rightly points out, as a town or parish council, your main source of income is raised through the precept and the council taxpayer. We've been very conscious of that in Minehead with our decision making. We've been really keen not to just put the precept up for the sake of putting the precepts up the case. Obviously, it has had an impact. Our precept has gone up. It went up the last financial year, and it went up the financial year before that. I think that, and this goes back more to Dave. It's not about, oh, it's okay, we'll pass it on to volunteers, we'll get them to do it because they do it for nothing. I think it's a bigger thing than that. It's about rallying your community. Our green spaces are very often such an important thing to our communities. When we receive complaints at town council, or you just hear them generally, and I'm sure it's the same across the board, people's barometer of how they pay their council tax is tied up in things like whether their grass is cut, flower beds are looking nice, bins are kept empty. People don't really see, and a lot of the costs of our council tax goes into the unknown or the unseen things like adult social care, child social care. But people's barometer of how their council tax is being spent is in the green spaces around us. So they are important to our communities, and I think we are lucky in Minehead as well. We do have some really good, strong community connections and community groups, and it really is about being quite innovative in, you know, you could just raise a precept and you would have some very upset residents. It's about looking at it very innovatively and laterally as well.
Shall I jump in on that as well?
Please do. Please do.
Yeah, so I agree 100% with what Ben just said. If community groups are enthused and, you know, empowered and engaged, you know, collaboratively in the long term, they will step up to the plate because they care very much about, like you say, the things that they can see that they can make a difference with. And groups can fundraise and often do, whether informally, you know, through their own activities, you know, sponsored activities, sponsored events or whatever, but also through applying for grants. And obviously when you're applying for grants, you often need to demonstrate that you've got, you know, authority from the landowner if you're going to be, you know, providing equipment or a bench or some kind of major improvements, and that has to be done collaboratively with the relevant authority. I just want to say one thing about there's no need to wait until a local green space becomes the, you know, the legal responsibility, the management of that space for your parish council or whatever. Friends groups or community involvement and engagement and empowerment can happen straight away, whatever the devolution process, and should happen straight away. Start engaging with communities, start involving them in the decision making, because most people won't understand and won't care about the, you know, the legal niceties of who controls what, and, you know, the process and how much, you know, all that complication behind the scenes. As far as they're concerned, this is their local public space. They want to be involved. You know, let's get on with it. So I think that, you know, the devolution process is a kind of parallel, you know, discrete issue. As far as community is concerned, you know, they need to be involved and engaged and empowered and so on, you know, everywhere. And, you know, that will help also with if a devolution process is happening and there's complications and you've already engaged the community and they're already on the case, that will help greatly in any event. I just want to sort of say about the previous question, I didn't really answer it in full, about public liability. Obviously, once you have a formalized organization, then you're acting on behalf of an like a friends group, which once you're constituted, you're obviously then acting on behalf of the organization rather than as an individual. And that covers you to a great extent, not completely, because if you've still got to act responsibly to the best of your ability. But obviously also that the group itself can be covered by agreement by the legal insurance and of the local authority. But once you're an established group and you're organising a number of events and activities, then you would be expected to get public liability for your own activities, which would cover all those involved. That is a cost. So this is, you know, it's not something that people can snap their fingers and just do. They would have to fundraise to get that public liability, and they would have to be constituted and get a bank account and all that kind of admin stuff. So yeah, but you know, a community group, you know, I think local authorities. If you look at your community groups, again, there's a whole spectrum of how informal and formal and strong that they are, and how long term they are. There are sports clubs, there are residents associations, there are all kinds of different community groups. So the experience is there in the community to you know, to learn from and inspire new groups to form.
Thank you, Dave. We have another question for yourself here. Do you have advice for how local councils, that's parish and town councils, can support or foster the creation of friends groups for green spaces that don't currently have them?
Sorry, was that for me? I thought it was.
Yes, sorry.
Oh,
so
sorry.
do you have advice for how parish and town councils can support
Yes.
and foster creation of friends groups, green spaces that don't currently have them?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So as probably everybody knows, communities are you know, they have their own dynamic and their own agendas and their own histories and character. So it's not like there's a simple template you can just say do X, Y, Z and it will happen. And it can be very delicate. So I think that the first thing is to have the right approach, the right policies, the right attitude in terms of working with communities. It's like, so you have the policies that we want our communities to be involved. We want them to be empowered. We want to, you know, support them to be partners in you know, in different ways. And so that's the first thing, the policy landscape. Then there's the attitude, which is, okay, you know, engaging with communities takes time. It takes officer time. Officers are all snowed under and very busy and under pressure, but it shouldn't be an add-on. Oh, well, we're not going to do community engagement because we haven't got the time or the resources. It should be a something that the local authority is committed to doing, and therefore have the attitude of this is something we want, we're going to build the relationships, we're going to overcome, you know, ups and downs, get through the downs and go through, you know, and work towards the ups in the relationship, because it can be as we all know, a rocky road. You know, working with communities and vice versa. Communities, there can be a historic kind of, oh, the council should be doing this and they're rubbish and all that kind of stuff. So we as communities need to also develop the right attitude, and that takes time, and it takes, that relationship needs to be nurtured. So that's the kind of the kind of, if you like, the strategic approach. But obviously, in terms of actually developing a group, it should come from the community. If it's like the council decided we need a friends group for this space, that may not be effective kind of dynamic. Oh, the council wants us to set up a friends group. You know, why? Because they want cheap labor. You know, so I think what you need to do is start identifying key people. There may be existing user groups, existing individuals who you know are interested in that space. Start building up that relationship and encourage the existing residents to take the initiative, supported by your local council or your amenities team or whoever, councillors. And it shouldn't be, obviously it shouldn't be party political. That goes without saying. Friends groups are you know, community groups that are loved by everybody. Yes, and then there's practical steps. So once you've got, maybe once you know that there's 4 or 5 individuals who are keen, so you can say to those 4 or 5 people, why don't you form a friends group? Call yourself Friends of X Green Space, and then start building up membership. You don't have to be constituted immediately. That might put people off, but start building up membership, email lists. You know, obviously the one person would have to be a secretary to manage that list. Maybe call a public meeting, then it has like public legitimacy. Start brainstorming on what are the key issues for that green space. you know, and so there's a whole process of developing a community group. But I think the most important thing is having the right attitude as local authorities, that you want to be supportive, and then building that relationship step by step.
Thank you. And I think we've got one last question. Time for one last question. So it says, in Essex, we'll soon have a new mayoral authority and a number of new unitary authorities. Although we have been advised to start discussions in relation to asset transfer, our district council is being slow to engage. Any hints and tips to encourage those conversations with the district council? Don't know if Theo or Ben, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult if the district council isn't keen to engage. You've got to keep pushing at that door. So work with whichever councillors, represent your area, try and get them to put pressure on, try and explain to the leadership, both the political leadership and the officer leadership within that council, the importance of having these conversations early in order to safeguard what are much valued assets for your communities. Because broadly speaking, you'll be speaking at a district council level, you're likely to be speaking to people who aren't terribly enamoured of the unitarisation programme. That's certainly been my experience of speaking to colleagues in Essex. They will be interested in how they can protect the things that their communities care the most about. It's just about getting their bandwidth. But whatever opportunities you have to engage, you just need to sort of keep pushing at that door. I can't add anything more sort of revelatory than that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Theo. Ben, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, well, I think what Theo said there about speaking to your local ward members, whether that's unitary or district councillors, I think they can provide a very valuable inroad. So, is to ensure that your relationships are strong with your local councillors. I think as well, depending on the relationship you have with your neighbouring towns and parishes, you might all be experiencing a similar situation. It may be that an open letter between you all, or to try and arrange a meeting with a service manager from your council with a number of local councils. I do know that has been a problem, and I'm pleased to say that in Somerset we have seen, I would say, with respect from an officer level, a real cultural shift where I had it once described to me by another clerk that with the higher tier authority, it's like mummy knows best, and they want to hold on to everything, and it can be very frustrating from a town and parish council. I think there does have to be a recognition on their part that times are changing, and that the towns and parish councils are likely to be playing a bigger role moving forward, and ultimately they need towns and parish councils to be playing a bigger role going forward. So yeah, I would certainly say start with your ward members. I think that when I've had difficulties, and I have had difficulties, my unitary councillors have been very, very good, and they have banged the drum, and they have managed to drive responses that I've struggled to get on my own.
Thank you, Ben. Now to sum up, on a final note, please could I ask our speakers to sum up by providing one thing parish and town councils can start doing straight away to improve management of their green spaces.
Shall I kick it off?
Yes, please, Dave.
Yeah, I think involving communities is a no-brainer. It's got to be done. But also it's not just about green spaces, it's about communities and councils working together to really care about public services, and to, they're under, pressure and threat because of lack of funding from central government, and we need to work together to get through this difficult time. But I think in the past it's been kind of about consulting with communities, but I think the future is about real engagement, involvement, and empowerment, so that people really are, the community are on the case in standing up for their public services.
Thank you, Dave. Theo?
So to principal authorities, I would say let your city, town and parish councils do what they want to do and get out of the way. If there's stuff they want to do, find a way of letting them do it. For the city, town and parish councils, I would say take a look at your community and have a think about what is it that you actually want, because you're not going to be in a situation where the principal authority is forcing you to take over responsibility of green spaces, because they can't do that. There's no legal way they can do that. So if you do it, you're doing it because you want to do it, and therefore you have to really think about what you want to get out of it, what you want to be different and better for your community before you decide to take it on. But if you do have that conversation and you do that thinking, you'll probably find that there are a lot of things you could do differently and better for your community. And then you can go and approach your top tier authority, your principal authority, and explain what you want to do. And if they're sensible, they'll listen to you and let you do it.
Thank you, Theo. And Ben?
I think my bit of advice is almost going to fall halfway between sort of what Dave was saying and what Theo was saying, but just communicate with your communities, whether that's just by sort of casual feedback or consultations, and then also communicate with your principal authority. Start the conversations nice and early. Like I say, if you are lucky enough to establish a single point of contact, that would be brilliant. Speak to your ward member councillors and then your own councillors as well, and really try and communicate the process and try and make it as inclusive as possible, because I think at that point then you should be able to paint a very clear picture of what your communities want, what your principal authority is prepared or may be prepared to hand over, the costings of such, and then it should really help focus your mind for what you want to achieve.
Thank you, Ben. So now I'll say huge thanks to our fantastic speakers, Dave, Theo, and Ben, for their valuable and insightful contributions today. Please do fill out the feedback form that appears on your screen. Our post-event mailing will go out to all attendees, and it will include the chat and any interactions you saw today. NALC would like to say huge thanks again to its partners for today's online event, Clear Council's Insurance, CCLA, and Bless Share Illuminations. Don't forget to check out our brilliant online events programme for events coming up through the summer. And entries are now open for NALC Star Council Awards. This is a great opportunity to nominate your council, clerk, or a councillor for their outstanding work. For more information, please see our Star Council webpage. Thank you for joining today. Goodbye.